Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the important hearing. Let's, Mr. Fetto, cut to the chase on the three major legislative proposals before us in the Congress. One, my bill, a bill that this committee has marked up, the Chinese Military and Surveillance Company Sanctions Act. That's an entity-based approach that uses OFAC to impose sanctions on Chinese entities of concern. Then there is the McCall-Meeks bill, a sector-based approach to Preventing Adversaries from Developing Critical Capabilities Act. That bill was marked up out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And then there's the Casey Cornyn approach in the Senate, the Outbound Investment Transparency Act, which is basically an investment notification regime. Mr. Fetto, which of these three approaches would hit Chinese military and intelligence companies or the CMIC entities harder?
Well, in my view, it's clearly your bill, Mr. Barr, because it immediately identifies those entities of concern which are on various lists with various levels of restrictions, immediately making them blocked persons, which, under economic sanctions regimes, a blocked person, virtually any dealing is prohibited with that person who's blocked. And so if we're trying to eliminate the intangibles related to that go with money, those are immediately eliminated, not just for investors, but for any U.S. person that might be aiding or supporting one of those entities.
Well, I appreciate your pointing that out. I do want to compliment and applaud my colleagues and friends, Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, Senators Casey and Cornyn, for their well-intentioned and patriotic efforts here to get at this problem of financing entities of concern. But Mr. Fetto, the argument in favor of this sector-based outbound investment regime is that it's forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking. That's the criticism of my bill, principally, that an entity-based sanctions approach would be under-inclusive, perhaps, and would fail to get at these venture-stage Chinese entities of concern. What is wrong with that analysis, in your view?
Well, I personally think that, there are a couple of things that are wrong. One is, if we've already identified entities of concern that are affiliated with civil-military fusion, then we ought to attack that problem right away. That's sort of an 80-20 attack of a problem. Furthermore, as I referenced in my opening statement, we're in the midst of a tech-industrial revolution that's moving so fast. Even a sector approach is going to be chasing its tail to some extent and reactive as well, because the technology ostensibly that we want to control is constantly moving forward and changing, and so we'll be chasing that as well.
Do these non-sanctions approaches, these sector-based approaches, do they have multilateral effect in the same way that a sanctions approach does?
Well, certainly not. I don't think so. I mean, especially not with a blocking and SDN listing, because that is the most powerful type of sanction we have. But even with a more tailored prohibition, the U.S. financial system becomes off limits for dealing with those named entities. It's immediate.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that the executive order and these other approaches, Casey Cornyn, McCall, Meeks, they're only restrictions on U.S. investment. And these Chinese entities of concern can get subsidies from the central government of China. They can get money is fungible. They can get non-U.S. investment funds. And it's the know-how that they want. Mr. Ashu, you made the important point that we should leverage existing authorities, and you point out the need for specific, clear, targeted, and well-defined action against these entities of concern in China. Does a sector-based approach place the enforcement responsibility on the private sector or the government?
Thank you, Mr. Barr. I'm not sure where it places the responsibility, and that's the problem with such a broad-based approach. I think a sectoral approach expresses maybe a shared concern, but as far as an implementation of authorities with effect, it's very challenging to do so. And I congratulate you on your approach, because it does the tests that I laid out in my testimony about using existing authorities, being multilateral, and addressing the gaps. Your bill marks all three.
Well, clarity and targeted and defined is very, very important, and a sanctions approach does that. It's red light, green light. There's no ambiguous yellow light, and that's what I'm concerned about, a sector-based approach, a big yellow light and a lot of confusion by the private sector whether the investment is okay or impermissible. Without a yield.